Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the North Carolina Department of Information Technology's Division of Broadband and Digital Opportunities BEAD program webinar for Internet Service Provider applicants. We are going to get started in just a moment. We have a lot of attendees, and I'm sure you will all have a lot of questions. Please use the chat feature to add your questions. I have made it able for you to unmic yourself if you have additional questions that we need follow-up for, but please stay muted for the interim. In the meantime, we will be recording this webinar. So if you have any questions and we are not able to get to it, we will see them in the chat and be able to get back to you. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the Broadband Infrastructure Office.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. We really appreciate your time and joining us this morning. We know everyone is super busy, and we heard there was a competing state with a webinar at the same time. So we appreciate you choosing North Carolina's webinar. I'm Angie Bailey. I'm director of the Broadband Infrastructure Office, housed in the Division of Broadband and Digital Opportunity at North Carolina Department of Information Technology. And with me, we have Gretchen Ramirez, who's our Deputy Director in the Broadband Infrastructure Office, and Ben Shelton, who's the Project Manager in our sister office, the North Carolina Center for Geographic Information and Analysis. We also have Matt DeHaven and Joe DeGraff from CTC Technologies. So we are going to dig in. Crystal, if we could go to the next slide, please. And the next one. Just some reminders for today. We have an hour scheduled. We are trying to leave time at the end for questions. This webinar is meant to be only for applicants that submitted pre-qualification materials and are working to pre-qualify for participation in our sub-grantee selection process for North Carolina for last mile broadband deployment projects. I think we have a few consultants helping companies that are pre-qualifying, and that's okay too. Just as a reminder, this is meant to be a high-level overview, so we can't quote and recite all of the many rules within the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the NTIA's BEAD, NOFO, and FAQs. So we're trying to, there's so much happening. We want to give a high-level overview. And again, you all are going to have to dig in on all the many rules that are out there as we are. We did publish some FAQs to our guidance last Friday. So those are on our website. If you haven't seen them, they're at ncbroadband.gov in the BEAD application page. We also have a webinar tomorrow from 10 to 11. That's for stakeholders. That's kind of broader updates on BEAD, kind of what we did between June 6th and now, where we are with our ARPA programs. And so you're welcome to join that as well. Next slide. So again, our pre-qualified providers, some folks are still in the process. We are trying to get all of our pre-qualification done this week if possible. These are providers that submitted application materials by the July 7th deadline. And so we know that's been a lift, and we appreciate y'all slogging through all the pre-qual. And again, that's to vet financial, technical, managerial, operational capacities of applicants before we get to the project applications. Next slide. And so again, there's a lot of guidance documents you really need to be familiar with as applicants. The original Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, NTIA's original NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, the June 6th BEAD restructuring policy notice. And again, NTIA is publishing FAQs pretty constantly. So their last published one, I don't think there's been one since then, was July 15th last week. There's a version 12 of the FAQs. So please, if you don't have time to read everything, please at least make sure you're familiar with the restructuring policy notice and the FAQs from last week. And just to kind of recognize, I know that our multi-state companies are very busy because all of the states are working on this at the same time. And I know our North Carolina only companies are I know it's a lift because you have not spent as much time on BEAD. So, anything we can do to help you understand the guidance, we hope the webinar will be helpful. Our North Carolina documents that are relevant, of course, our initial proposal volume 1 was mostly about the challenge process. That's done. Initial proposal volume 2 is kind of superseded by this BEAD restructuring policy notice. We've got our state BEAD legislation, Session Law 2024-55. And then we have worked to bring that into compliance with the new restructuring policy notice. And so the new language is in House Bill 125, which passed the Senate a couple weeks ago, and House Bill 819, which passed the House. The language mirrors each other. Next slide, please. So basically today we're going to go over the application materials quickly, project areas, eligible locations, how you submit materials in the Enterprise Business Services System. We'll touch on scoring, evaluation, negotiation, tentative awards, and then kind of what does the grant agreement process look like super quickly. Next slide. Oops. Yeah, so the timeline, I think everyone knows the timeline. Our applications in North Carolina are due next Wednesday, July 30th by 11:59 p.m. That is submitted in our EBS online grants management system. We'll then be digging in on review, scoring, evaluation right away. We have already started drafting of the final proposal, which will be due to NTIA. We will continue working on that, and all of this we'll have to post for public comment. We've said we'll post by August 27th. There's a 7-day required window. And then the final proposal gets submitted to NTIA September 4th. So that's the time we're looking at. Next slide, please. And so as we dig in, I just want to say thank you all for participating. We know it's a big lift, and I really want to thank, I know we're in the middle of the presentation, but I really want to thank our team at the Broadband Infrastructure Office and our division, and especially the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis with all their mapping work. Also KPMG's, who's supporting us with our pre-qual, and CTC Technologies, who's supporting us in lots of ways in planning, but also engineering. We say we're all in this together, so we will dig in on the actual materials. There's 4 main application materials that y'all are responsible for submitting. So the EBS project application form, the proposed project data template. So Gretchen's going to talk more about the EBS form. Ben's going to talk more about the data template, the project technical plan and evidence submission, and then BEAD certification. So we've tried to keep it as simple as possible because we know the timeline is so short. There's also a lot of information we will collect later, and I will touch on that. Next slide, please. So the EBS project application form, and again, Gretchen's going to go into more detail, but this is just for concept-wise, if you've not participated in a grant or other award with North Carolina, this is our online grants management system, and it kind of allows us to capture this each project application within that online system. And so you will have to submit for each project separately within that system. Your company name, and Gretchen can touch on this, is going to have to be the same legal entity that pre-qualified for participation in BEAD. And there are some certifications in the EBS system, and to be totally honest, those are ones we already had built in there. We didn't have a lot of time to redevelop the online tool, and so that's why we've got these other application components that are outside of the EBS tool. Next slide. But that's what that's about. The BEAD proposed project data template, this one's really, really important. Ben is going to go over this in more detail, but we do need it in Excel. So please note that this is essentially where your BSLs or community anchor institution location, where that data goes. And this is also where you say whether you want your project to be considered as a priority project or not. There's a yes, no field. That's really, really important. This is also where your funding request goes, is only in this field. Well, and I think it's in EBS too. Total project costs, matching funds, grant amount requested is all in this field. So please pay attention to those pieces. And that's what this template is about. And then all of this gets pulled So we will ingest this, Ben will explain in his system, the CGIA database, and this is what we use to populate the final proposal data. So next slide. So the project technical plan and evidence submission. So we have a screenshot here of what this looks like in the actual guidance document. So there's one template for fiber, one for hybrid fiber coax, one for licensed fixed wireless, one for unlicensed fixed wireless, one for LEO satellite. And so you need to be using the template that matches with the technology type for the project you're submitting. And then there's instructions for each one. And this is kind of where we're going to look at, you have to provide evidence to demonstrate the scalability of the infrastructure for each project. So we do need a template submitted with every project. Again, corresponding with the right technology type. So please pay attention that you're using the right one. Next slide. The other, just a couple reminders on this template is, so again, you have to provide evidence of the technical capacity to meet the definition of a priority broadband project, if that's what you're requesting. And so I have the definition for priority broadband project is listed on the slide. This comes from the NTIA's new restructuring notice. This is also, so as we analyze these evidence templates, then we'll obviously pull the BSL data from the project data template. And so all that gets analyzed together, but the BSLs do not live in this template. And then the other thing, we did get a question, which was a good question last week on supplemental supporting document.
Okay, folks, it looks like we're having a technical issue this morning. Please be patient. We will see if we can get Angie back. Just 1 second.
I'm sorry, I don't know, I got frozen for a minute. Can y'all hear me if I join from my phone? Okay,
Yes.
I just wanted to give you plenty of time to read this slide. I apologize. Hopefully my internet will kick back in a second. Okay, now let's come back on. Sorry. So essentially, we don't expect a lot of supporting or supplemental evidence or documents. We really want everything in the template. And actually, if you're gonna include something that's separate, we need you to reference it in the template. So we don't want companies just sending us like volumes of generic network information. It really needs to tie back to specifically what we're requesting in the template itself. Okay, next slide. Again, I apologize for freezing. Crystal, are we able to move to the next, or maybe I can move it?
We're on
No,
BEAD
we're on BEAD
certification.
certifications.
Oh, okay, sorry. I think, all right. So BEAD certifications, this is simply a kind of a list that we've developed of all of the various certifications that we think are required by NTIA. And so we're asking you all to review and sign and then upload that as a PDF. You know, it's when we get to grant agreements, which will be months away, some of this information will obviously be contained in there. But for now, we need to capture it this way. We do have a couple questions that we have pending with one applicant, and we're kind of running that through legal. But these are the certifications that we have collected. Next slide.
We're on BEAD projects now.
Okay, sorry, I got out of sync with when I got kicked off. So the BEAD projects, just to make sure everybody's clear, and this wording is coming from our guidance. So we're asking you to select individual BSLs for your projects. There's going to be one primary round of applications for North Carolina. There is some language in our negotiation process around potential additional mini rounds, but there's just this one primary round. Obviously, this application window includes all tech types, and it includes the benefit of the bargain opportunity that's discussed in NTIA's restructuring notice. We are asking applicants to you have to submit projects within individual counties, as we have done with our prior Great Grant and CAB programs. So projects have to be located within a single county boundary, cannot go outside the county. Within the county, project areas do not need to be contiguous. Non-contiguous locations may be submitted either as part of a larger project or grouped into smaller separate projects. So for those of you, again, that have applied for Greater CAB, this is a similar concept. And on that first bullet, I skipped over. So the hex bins, there is a hex bin ID that we're tying to each BSL. It's essentially the size of one BSL. That's just kind of for internal purposes, and Ben's going to talk about that. So there's no kind of coverage requirements, essentially. You just choose the BSLs that you're proposing to serve within a county. All right, next slide. On BEAD projects, applicants are permitted to submit more than one proposed project in a county with the following requirements. Again, this is similar to CAB. You can submit multiple projects, but you can't have the same location submitted in more than one. So no overlapping locations. And then we do ask, obviously, that if you're going to submit multiple projects, that you be prepared to actually accept them if you're selected for a tentative award and a final award. We have not established an extremely high cost per location threshold, and we did have outlier language in our state legislation, but because we're now having folks submit individual BSLs, there's really the outliers is kind of a moot point. And then, of course, pursuant to NTIA requirements and our legislation, service to unserved locations is priority, followed by underserved, and then CAIs. All right, and so now I'm going to turn it over to Ben Shelton to talk about BEAD eligible locations. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. So with the NC1Map platform, it's nc1map.gov. We have a whole broadband page. If you're not familiar with it, I definitely recommend going there to find any kind of data related to the BEAD program and developing your project areas. On that BEAD or on that broadband page, we have a planning section that has a planning tool there shown in the screenshot that kind of allows some data visualization and identifying of some project areas. We published the BEAD planning map preliminarily on June 20th, and then we've worked to update it, following a couple different data modifications that we were making. We confirmed all of the CAB program award locations. We had an unlicensed fixed wireless challenge window that we went through, and then we also submitted all of the final BSLs for approval to NTIA since the restructuring notice on June 6th. But on that planning card, you'll see, just to note a couple of things, the view and the data button will take you to a different application and some data points that you can use to plan your project areas and some downloadable data sets. Next slide, please. So, coming out of the challenge process that we went through last fall, there were, just over 171,000 unserved and underserved locations, eligible locations for the BEAD program, and 1,215 community anchor institutions. Since that challenge period, we've gone through, a whole round of CAB awards. So those locations have been crosswalked into the version of the fabric that the BEAD program is using, which is version 4. And we've removed all of those locations that were awarded through that CAB program. We've also gone through a couple data modifications to validate the eligible locations against the latest version of the fabric, version 6. We're able to kind of remove locations that are not present in the BSL fabric, the broadband serviceable location fabric, the latest version, which is version 6, And so we've identified 7,016 of those locations and removed those from the eligible BEAD locations. We've also gone through and modified the community anchor institution eligible location list to remove some locations that were in different categories that were not applicable anymore after the restructuring policy notice. And then we've also been notified of a local award in Burke County with the, just a minor amount of locations that were removed. So in the end, what that leaves us with is 103,760 eligible locations on the map and 1,076 community anchor institutions. So that's, as we go through things, if you've downloaded the location data set before, those are good numbers to understand. You can go and check the locations that you've downloaded before. If the number does not match, I definitely recommend going to the broadband page on NC1 Map and re-downloading those location files and making sure you're using the latest files when you're putting together your projects. Next slide, please. Here's a glimpse at the BEAD planning tool. So this is just a data visualization tool to kind of understand where the project areas could be formed and where the eligible locations are located throughout the state. When you're zoomed out at kind of a state level or a regional level, you'll see the hex bins at a few different resolutions that are just showing where those eligible locations are concentrated throughout the state. And if you go and filter up in the top left, you can filter on a specific county and understand how many eligible locations that specific county will have, because everything will update and refresh and filter when you select that county filter. We've also provided a direct download of all the eligible broadband service locations and eligible community anchor institutions right there on the bottom left arrow. You can just click those links, and that's just going to be a direct download from our Amazon Cloud storage, where we have a CSV file of all those locations. All of the downloadable products that I'm going to go through here on NC1 Map, because of the CostQuest license, we're not able to put out spatially enabled products that have the CostQuest BSLs in them. So what we've provided here are lists of location IDs, and I'll get into the template of the data that's downloaded, but they are just a list of location IDs that then you will just have to join to the copy of the fabric that you have if you're a licensed user of that fabric on your end. So by using that location ID, you can join it to the geometry and do your project planning. Next slide, please. And if you filter on a county, so in this example, it's filtered on Henderson County. When you get to that county view, the actual locations will show up. Everything in red here are locations that are eligible for the BEAD program, part of that 103,000 that I mentioned. You'll notice that the eligible locations in the bottom left have updated to be the 3,936 that are eligible within Henderson County. We also provide the community anchor institutions, or the green points on the map. Might be difficult to see in this slide presentation, but there are green points on that map that represent those community anchor institutions that can be applied for in this program. And then the gray points are just all the ineligible BSLs due to service or the challenge portal results that we went through in the fall. Next slide, please. And like I mentioned, you can get to that application using the view button there on the card, or if you want to go into the actual data sets to do some filtering and downloading of specific counties, you can use that data button. There will be a list of layers there and tables, and you can download the locations through that. But again, the same links that we provided in the planning tool for those statewide files are also provided right there at the top of that planning section. You can download the eligible BSLs and eligible CAIs using those links at the top, and those were updated last on July 7th. So if you've downloaded any of those files previously from before July 7th, you definitely recommend going out there and re-downloading that. And then when you go into that data button, if you go to the next slide, please, Crystal. You'll see the layers that I mentioned, the tables that are downloadable. You can use the tools there in the blue bar that's kind of in the middle, or to the left third of the screen. And there's a filter button. You can filter on any fields that are.
Oh no!
He's got an approved application.
So,
Stephanie.
um,
There we go. Thanks. Using tools in the screen there, you can filter based on the county that you're interested in. In this example, it's filtered by Henderson County. And then if you go to the next tool down from the filter is where the download options are. You can download this data as a CSV. And all the other ones, the shapefile, GeoJSON, will not have a spatial field, so you'll still have to join the table to your location fabric. But if you're looking for a specific county, I just wanted to highlight that definitely recommend toggling the filter so you only download the filtered data set and not the full statewide data set. So just make sure that you have that toggle that's highlighted by the arrow. Next slide, please. So once you've planned your projects, you've mapped things out, and you've selected the locations you want in your project that you're submitting, this is where the project data template comes in. We've put together this Excel template, and on the first page of that template is a README file that contains all the data dictionary fields, with information, examples, and whether they're required or not. So you see over in the column E that there's a required fields column, and for each of the 3 tabs at the bottom, it'll list exactly which fields are required for each project. It'll also list required as provided for any field that when you download those locations are already provided, like the county, the location ID, and things like that are in the downloadable data. Those will be listed and say that they're required as provided. So I definitely recommend reading through this README in the first tab of the Excel spreadsheet to get all the different details that you need to pay attention to when you're putting together your data. Next slide, please. And then the other 3 tabs besides the README, those are where all your project details go in. The project tab is the only tab where you will have to fill out everything for yourself. There should be really only one row of information in that project tab. And that row will contain everything about the grant amount being requested, the match, all the financial details, the project name, and some of these other things that you may come up with on your own, and just refer to that README for all of the required fields that you need on this tab. The BSL tab and the CAI tab are both coming directly from that downloadable data from NC1MAP. And when you download those data sets on NC1MAP, they will already be in this template. They'll have all of these fields. Some of them will be null, and anything that's null in that downloadable data is the fields that you will be required to fill out. So things like the hex bin ID that Angie mentioned, that's for our internal tracking purposes only, really, but that is already included in the downloadable data sets, so you can just copy that information for those locations over into this template. And everything, location ID, classification, county, and the hex bin ID, all of those are included in that downloadable data set. The only fields you would really have to fill in once you copy and paste it into this template would be the technology, the download speed anticipated, upload speed anticipated, and the low latency. So those 4 fields are really all you're responsible for on that tab. In the community anchor institution, it's the same 4 fields that you're responsible for. Everything else should be filled out if you've downloaded the data from NC1MAP and just copied the records you need over into this tab. And then we have a file naming convention that's recommended just to kind of create a unique file name for your project files. And then we'll refer that to that in all of our processing. And when we take all of this data, the goal of using this Excel template is to standardize everything so we can automate and process all of this very quickly, get Angie and Gretchen and their teams all the information they need about your projects as quickly as possible so they can do the evaluations. Since we're in such a time crunch and such a quick turnaround, we want to make sure everything's following the template so that when we get to the automation piece, we don't have any data issues. Because we're going to be checking, a few different validation steps about whether the file matches this schema, this specific Excel schema, whether there are locations all within one county, if there's duplicate locations, all the locations are eligible. We'll be doing all of these checks in a quick and automated fashion to get the information over to Angie and Gretchen. and so that they can evaluate everything on the technical side. Next slide, please. And then the no BEAD locations. We're also, kind of separating out the no BEAD locations into its own template that you can submit to us. We are accepting things for certain codes through the no BEAD process. I just definitely want to recommend you go and look at the guidance for this process. It's out on the broadband office's website. And really, it's just, are there locations in and around the projects that you will be submitting that you feel should be qualified as no BEAD and don't require any BEAD funding, whether that's non-BSLs or other reasons. You can see all the reason codes and definitely refer to the FAQ and the materials out on the broadband website. And I think next slide. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen now, correct?
Perfect. Thanks. If you go to the next slide. All right. So we just wanted to do a quick overview of submitting the application materials. A lot of providers are familiar with EBS and kind of how we did things for CAB, but we wanted to make sure that we've outlined that things are a little bit different for BEAD. So all the applications for BEAD projects must be submitted through EBS. It's our, like Angie said, our online grants management system. It is different than the pre-qualification material. So we were doing that through our NC Bio Data Exchange. Everything must be submitted through EBS. You have to request credentials, and I think we've worked with almost all the providers that we have one-on-one. So there are a few that are still working on getting our credentials. The approvals could take up to 5 days. So if you haven't already started, again, I believe everybody has, we want to make sure that we get that done. So reach out to the bead@nc.gov email box if you're still having issues with EBS. And we want to make sure that you're utilizing the application instructions to ensure your access prior to July 30th. What that means is please look in EBS, like once you've got access, here's your login, go into EBS. Even for our seasoned providers, please go into EBS, make sure that your credentials work, that you're able to pull up the BEAD application. You don't have to start one. We just want to make sure that you guys can get in there and move around prior to July 30th. We don't want anybody to miss out on anything because it's the day of and we're not able to get something in there. Again, all the application materials have to be uploaded to EBS for consideration. We will not be able to accept anything outside the system. And that goes for the 4 items that Angie talked about, the application, which is through EBS, the template that Ben just talked about, the tech type template, and then the certifications template that's out there. We have to make sure all of those things are uploaded. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is just kind of a snapshot of the submission of the application. So when you go into EBS, there's a few tabs. This is the project tab. This is probably the one that has the most information to fill in. So the project title is the same thing that's going to go on that project template sheet that Ben talked about. Just make sure those 2 names match. The total project cost. So we want to know the entire cost, including the match, what it costs to get the project done. The county, so this one's a little bit different for those of you that participate in CAB. You're going to select the county. This is going to drive where the application is from. For CAB, we had different actual places where you would go in. So there wasn't, you were able to kind of double check yourself, like you had your county name, plus you were in that county application file. This is one application program, and you have to actually select the county to tell us where you're at. So that's a very important step. Make sure that you do that. And then the estimated number of locations. This is going to be all the locations. We don't have this separated out by CAIs and regular locations. So if you could just put the entire estimated amount of locations. And then this is a little bit different. It's a budget description. So the budget description is actually, because we're not asking for a budget right now, like a detailed budget. We want a narrative that just kind of describes what the budget, why it is what it is. So the total project cost and what kind of makes that up, and supporting information on why it costs that much. It's a limited box, but if you could fill that in, please do not refer to other materials. So for this particular this particular piece of it, we want to see the actual description in this box, and not anything that says see other document or we've uploaded something else. The last piece is just this little checkbox that says that you've uploaded everything. So it's just kind of like an extra reminder. It doesn't really do anything except for when you click it. If you've read it, it's telling you, hey, did you upload everything that's in the guidance? And so we just wanted to give you that extra step to say that you've uploaded all your required documents. And again, that's 3 outside documents. And then the 4th one is this actual shell. Next slide. Okay, so this is going to go back over to Angie.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen. So we'll touch briefly on scoring, evaluation, and negotiation. And I know we're getting some questions in the chat, so we will come back to those. So scoring, we will select, and I'm going to be kind of reading at you, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to use the kind of verbiage exactly as we have it in our guidance. So we will select the combination of project proposals with the lowest overall cost to the program. So this may involve selecting a proposal that's the lowest cost option for a given set of BSLs, or as part of a combination of selected projects with the lowest overall cost to the program. So it could be cost per BSL, could be cost to the program overall. And priority broadband projects will receive prioritization for award, followed by non-priority projects. And I would ask you all to please look at, NTI is putting out a lot of FAQs. There's a particular one, 3.15, that came out, I believe, last week, that talks about what should eligible entities consider when determining minimal BEAD program outlay. And so again, it's total BEAD funding required for the project, cost per BSL of the project, but also the combination of the proposals with the lowest overall cost to the program. So I urge you, and to be honest, we were going to republish their 3.15, and we haven't done that yet. So I'll just verbally ask you all to look at that. Next slide, please. Sorry, I lost my, and so deduplication, this will be kind of similar to what we've done with our Great Grant and our CAB program. So we'll take preliminary assignments for awards, priority awards that don't have overlapping areas. That'll be fairly straightforward. Where the cost is not excessive, we have not set an excessive cost amount. So I'm kind of giving you, this is a bit gray, but we will determine that once we receive project applications. Then we'll start deconfliction process for applications that propose to serve overlapping project areas. So we identify the highest ranking projects where cost is not excessive, and then we kind of, those receive tentative awards, and we deduplicate from there and repeat the process down, try to get all of our BSLs assigned. We may also offer applicants the opportunity to reduce their proposed costs for projects with excessive costs. And again, I acknowledge we've not set an excessive cost threshold, but we do know that NTIA is tracking that. And so we will be looking at that as we analyze all the projects that come in. Next slide, please. And so then subsequent selection rounds and direct negotiations, we do anticipate this being a fairly big part of the process just because of the time restraints. We're not sure how many projects we will receive, but we may conduct additional application rounds or direct negotiation to achieve universal BEAD service coverage. We're still trying to get to 100%, a solution for 100% of our BEAD eligible locations. So we'll look at whether we would do an additional round on a county by county basis or go directly to negotiations. And so we'll have to see what we receive. We may launch time limited bidding rounds where no applications were received, or preliminary assignments made for unserved or underserved BSLs or CAIs. We may negotiate directly with the original applicant or other applicants preliminary awarded or serving nearby or adjacent locations, or we may bypass additional rounds and negotiate directly with pre-qualified applicants. And again, this is all language that's coming directly from the guidance. And I want to kind of try to restate this verbally on a webinar, but if you have questions, we're happy to respond. We know how important this piece is. In cases where no pre-qualified applicant has expressed interest in an area, we may prioritize direct negotiation with pre-qualified applicants with infrastructure in the area based on FCC BDC service data. So if we don't get any applications, there's no interest seemingly, we may reach out to pre-qualified applicants that have infrastructure in that area to negotiate. We will prioritize negotiations with preliminary priority broadband project awardees in these areas. So that's kind of how we're tackling this. Next slide, please. Tentative awards and additional information. So as soon as we kind of have our preliminary assignments set and we locked in, we will be notifying applicants as soon as possible during the evaluation process, because there's also a fair amount of additional information we're going to need to collect from you all. And so this is covered in the guidance, but additional individual project detail will be required for all projects recommended for award, including further network design, diagram, project costs and budget, build-out timeline, milestones for project implementation, capital investment schedule, and then certain of those items require a professional engineer stamp. So these are all being required by NTIA. We didn't feel like you all could complete this in this tiny window. But again, we're going to be requesting this basically right away after we have a tentative award. So be on the lookout for that. And so along with that, the letter of credit. So we won't require that yet, but we will request a letter of commitment, or for the performance bond, it would be a commitment letter. And so that would be requested once we have a tentative award assigned. And our hope is that for letter of credit and performance bond, that we could kind of look at all of your awards together. I mean, we have to have all of this done by August 26th, so we could look at all of them together, so you could just get one letter of credit or one commitment letter for a performance bond. So we will be working with you on this closely. Next slide, please. Grant agreements, just to, again, we're not covering this in much detail today. Next slide, please. But just quickly, because obviously we need to be thinking ahead to this. So again, we submit our tentative project awards to NTIA September 4th. They have 90 days to approve. That's what they've said they will do it within 90 days. And so then once we have those awards approved by NTIA, we'll work with you all on collection of additional remaining materials during contracting. And so things like the actual letter of credit, performance bond will be required during the contracting process. And again, I think you all know this, but NTIA's requirement is that you all have 4 years to build the network, and that's from the time that we contract with you all. So I think how it will work, I don't know if NTIA will take the full 90 days. That would push it back towards the end of the year. I assume it will take a fair amount of time to get all this contracted. And then it'll be 4 years from that date, and you all will be able to tell us when you submit your actual timelines, the real timing that you're looking at. Next slide, please. And so we have some links you all can check for it. Please send any questions to bead@nc.gov, because we have multiple staff that check that email. Please don't send them to individual staff members. NC1 map that contains CGIA's, all of the mapping data for our broadband programs, including the BEAD planning tool. Our subgrantee selection guidance for last mile broadband deployment is posted, obviously on our website, and then our BEAD program FAQs is posted. And we will probably be updating that in the next day or so. We last published last Friday. Next slide, please.
Okay, now comes the fun time for all the attendees' questions. So I'm going to start at the top and hand them over to the team. So first question is by Jessica. Where in the application documents do we need to add PE certification?
Yeah, so that is not collected until after you have a tentative award. And so we're not requiring a PE certification for this application phase.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question by Sarah. Regarding this certification template, are items 3B and 15 still relevant in light of NTIA's restructuring notice?
We are looking at that question, Sarah. So we got that from you all, and we're gonna have to look at that and get back to you in writing. So apologize for that, but hopefully that will get back to you in the next day or two.
Thank you. Okay, Mark asked, and this is for the good of the group, will the recording of this webinar be available? Yes, we will share a link with you all afterward, so I can answer that one. And then Pamela writes in, will the selection of projects for award be at the HEXPIN level or the county level?
Yes, and so that I did respond in writing. We'll be selecting BSLs within individual counties.
Perfect. Thank you. I know sometimes not everyone can access the chat, so I wanted to make sure and verbalize all of these.
Yeah.
Next question comes in from Sandy. Are bids restricted to locations in a single county?
Projects have to be submitted within individual counties. And so and Gretchen can elaborate, but so when you actually go into EBS, you have to select the county that you're submitting the project for.
Perfect. Okay, Dakota writes, are providers required to build out the entire HEXBIN, or can specific locations within the HEXBIN be excluded from the submission?
Providers are required to build to the BSLs submitted and subsequently contracted. So again, the HEXBIN, I apologize. I know we debated this internally. Maybe we should have left them out. The HEXBIN really it's only the size of a BSL, so it's kind of a moot point for y'all's purposes.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that, the hex bins in the map are just for visualization purposes only. So if you're selecting hex bin, locations, those hex bins are just, for visualizing where those areas of most need are. They're not really applicable to your application.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, Pamela writes back again, can we indicate the BSLs that we consider as part of a group so we aren't awarded a stranded BSL that we priced as part of a group?
We do not have a way to capture that, or we did not include a way to capture that. So I think what we would do, as we've done with other deduplication processes, if a applicant's not getting the full award, we would reach back out to the provider and discuss whether you want remaining BSLs or not.
And to add to that as well, if there's additional fields that are added to the template when you submit, those will not be processed. So I would definitely recommend not adding any fields to the template. If you have notes like that, include them elsewhere, but not in the data template.
Great. And then Sandy asks, are the official project areas any group of BSLs in a single county or the group of BSLs in a selected group of hex bins within a county? If it's hex bins, what size hex bin should be used to aggregate BSLs?
The official project areas are any group of BSLs in a single county.
Dakota writes in, which version of the fabric should our GIS teams be using, or is it all required information already included in the download package?
The version is version 4 of the fabric, which I believe was released in December of 2023. That was the version of the fabric that went into our challenge portal last fall. And so that's what the version that we include in all of these data downloads.
Thank you, Ben. Jessica writes, do we need to include the no BEAD BSLs in our proposals?
No. So the no BEAD, we're treating it as a separate process because the applications are at the BSL level. If you think a location is not a BSL, then we would just recommend you not include it in the application. And we separated it out just because it's such a short amount of time, and we don't want, when you submit applications, please focus on the BSLs you want in your project. For providers that have time, we would really appreciate y'all submitting no BEAD data to us so we can kind of refine And obviously identify locations that aren't actual BSLs. Ben, do you have anything to add on that?
I will note that we are doing our own internal analysis of no BEAD locations at the same time, because when we get to our final proposal to NTIA, we'd like to, cover all locations. And if something needs to be removed to the map before then, we'd like to identify that. So we're doing our own process. And if you've got your own process internally you would like to contribute to it, we appreciate that. But definitely, if you're going to submit them as no BEAD, don't include them in your application, because we'll have to amend the award later if that's included.
And just note the no BEAD, anyone that wants to submit no BEAD data, that's also due July 30th, because we really need to be processing that at the same time as we're assessing applications, making tentative awards. We don't want no BEAD data coming in, August 15th, and we've already spent a few weeks on working with the BSLs. So July 30th is the due date for that data as well.
Thank you. Okay, Pamela asks, can you submit more than one application per county if using different technologies, for example?
Yes, you just can't submit the same BSL in more than one project.
Perfect. Okay, Kahina asks, is batching of applications allowed for applicants bidding a large number of BSLs?
I'm not sure what batching of application means. So each applicant has to submit applications within each county, each individual county. We have 100 counties in North Carolina.
Okay. If you have any additional questions in there, Kahina, please use the chat feature. Or someone just came on off mute. Okay. Okay, back to the questions. Oh, that does address her questions. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. What about reason code 5 BSLs? Should those be part of a submitted project? From Sarah.
No BEAD location should be submitted as part of your project application.
Perfect. Okay, Dakota asks, and we're running up on time, but Dakota asks, if we're only focused on building to the location itself, are we still required to submit the hex bin during the application phase? I understand it's mainly for visualization, but slide 26 of this presentation includes a column for hex bin ID.
And we include the hex bin ID in the downloadable data. So all the locations that are downloaded have a hex bin identifier as well. And it's really for our own internal purposes, but it is level 13 hex bin sizes, which I think are, only about less than 100 square feet. So they're very small hex bins, and we're just using them as like a tracking, because, with all the different variations between the fabric versions, we are just kind of using that to kind of identify structures where that BSL is located and tracking that going forward. So you should have the hex bin IDs for that level 13 data set on the downloadable data that you get from NC1 map. So it really shouldn't include any extra steps for you, except to include that when you copy the rows from the download.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, Sandy asked another question about multiple bids. Can you do multiple bids per county, even if it's the same technology?
Yes, you just can't submit the same BSL in multiple project applications.
Thank you. Okay, and Brittany writes in, is a pro forma required at the application stage?
No, this will be part of the information collected as soon as we make a tentative award, and we will be sending you a notice of that, and then a kind of a whole listing of all the additional information that will be required that we need to collect, including the pro forma.
Okay, and we're down to our last question from Jessica. Can I apply? Oh, no, there are more coming in. Can I apply for costs for a tower in one county that serves several eligible VSLs in an adjacent county?
I think so, but let us double check on that and respond in writing.
Perfect. Thank you. And this is a great question for Mark. How do you guys look so awake when I'm sure you've had some sleepless nights in the wake of BEAD restructuring?
Coffee. Coffee.
Coffee, lots and lots of
Well, I
coffee.
was really stressed because we didn't have many people register, and I was like, oh no. But a lot of folks, there's a lot of last minute things happening. So we appreciate everybody registering and jumping on this morning.
And thank you, Mark, for the nice laugh. We needed that. Okay, let's see. Sarah asked, what will the turnaround time be for a letter of credit and pro forma?
Yes, good question. So the pro forma is with the set of information that includes kind of the project timelines, more technical information, the PE stamp, all of that. And so within the NTIA rules, we're supposed to be collecting this during the subgrantee selection process. So that's going to be a quicker turnaround because, we get that we're supposed to have this. So there's that piece, which will be fairly quick, but to be honest, if you all have input on how much time it takes to pull all that together, we would love for you to let us know. We want it to be reasonable. Letter of credit will be during the contracting phase, and so that will be, again, if you have feedback on time needed during contracting, but we're kind of less worried about that timeline, if that makes sense.
You're already getting some suggestions in the chat.
Okay.
The last question I see right now is the post-award audit requirement 4 years or 10 years?
Yeah, I think we have that question and we have to respond in writing that you have 4 years, winning applicants have 4 years to build. And then the federal interest period is 10 years. So we'd have to look at the audit requirement. I'm not positive, but we will get back to you, Chris.
Perfect. So that's all of our questions from now. I know Angie said this earlier, but we really, really thank everyone for taking time out. We know how busy you are. We know how much time this takes. So we appreciate it. This is an important program. We appreciate you participating. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Again, write into us at bead@nc.gov. Angie, any final words?
Yeah, sorry, I thought of one other thing. So we are planning a webinar with NTIA for applicants on NEPA requirements. So we haven't spent a lot of time or any much time at all with you all on environmental permitting requirements. So we're looking at the first week of August for that. And because, we've got so much time on our hands. No, but we want to be able to share kind of how that works, especially if you've not been through those processes before you kind of accept these awards. And so it's on your radar. So we're coordinating with NTIA and we'll be letting you all know about that timing in the next few days. And just thank you all so much for all your time and energy on this work.
Yes, we appreciate you. Again, any questions, bead@nc.gov. Thanks so much, you all. Bye-bye.